Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 240. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Liz Alterman about her new book, Claire Casey's Had Enough. Claire Casey is a 40-something-year-old mom of three who was recently separated from her husband and is facing the decision of whether to reconcile or file for divorce. The book follows Claire through one 13-hour day in which her life feels like it's spinning out of control. When an old flame gets in touch and asks Claire out on a date, she is forced to revisit her hopes and dreams and things that took a back seat to marriage and family, all while trying to deal with the everyday chaos of being a suburban mom. As it all gets to be too much, Claire has to be honest with herself, take a hard look at her life, and decide what she really wants. In this episode, I'll chat with Liz about her writing journey, how a story that's told over the course of one day took 7 years to write and publish, and what she learned about the importance of comp titles in query letters and marketing, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Liz Alterman, thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stacey. I'm thrilled to chat with you again.
Yes, this is your second time on the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. So you've written a couple books since then. What we're going to do today, I think, starting out, is talk about your newest, which will be out shortly after this episode airs. It's called Claire Casey's Had Enough. If you don't mind, tell us a little about this book and what inspired you to write it.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Yes, it should be out June 3rd of 2025. And it follows, it's told over the course of 13 hours. It's a day in the life of Claire Casey. And she's a 40-something mom of three who, as the title suggests, has just kind of had enough. She is separated from her husband, kind of trying to make the decision about should they reconcile or is it time to call it quits? And this book takes place on a September day, as I said, over 13 hours. But before that, she and her husband separate in May. And then in June, she goes to her college reunion where she runs into a guy that she dated during her senior year. And, he really wasn't the one who got away, but he sort of serves as a catalyst to remind her of all the hopes and dreams that she had back during those college years and things that have really taken a backseat. She had a children's picture book, but now she's in a job she does not love. And, she keeps thinking about how to resurrect her career in a better way and just hasn't really been able to do it while she's been making cupcakes for the PTA and driving her kids and one activity to the next, trying to catch the neighbor who keeps letting their dog relieve himself on their lawn and not clean up after it. So she kind of, she wakes up on this day in September and she gets a message from this former boyfriend, Alex, and they've been exchanging emails all summer, but that's as far as it's gone. And when she gets his email, he says he's coming to town for a business trip, not far from where she lives, and would she like to meet him for a drink? And she realizes in that moment, like, it's go time. She has to make a decision. She knows if she meets him, it's probably going to be more than just that drink. And so it kind of sends her into, as I say, a 13-hour tailspin of, will she, won't she? while she's still trying to juggle her job and her kids' activities and the volunteering commitments and all sorts of other things that go wrong in the over the course of a day in the life of a suburban mom.
So this is a departure from what you have been writing fairly recently over the last several years.
Yes.
What was the spark for this story that made you decide, okay, those thriller and suspense books that I've been writing, I'm going to pause and I'm going to write something completely different. What was that thing that made you decide, okay, there's enough here for me to invest my time?
Well, thank you. It's funny. I'm glad you asked because the behind the scenes story is that things actually happened in the opposite way. Back in, I guess, 2014, 2015, I wrote a memoir called Sad Sacked that followed the period that came after my husband and I lost our jobs within 6 weeks of one another. So I spent about 2 years kind of mining my life, taking writing workshops, visiting some ugly periods in my own life. And so when I finished it, I was in this writing group that was kind of an offshoot of the workshops I'd taken. And one woman in it said, "Who wants to join me doing NaNoWriMo this November, that national write a novel during the month of November?" So I thought, wow, to write a novel and to get the bulk of it down in just 1 month after struggling for 2 years with nonfiction seems like a dream come true. So I'd had this idea about a woman who reconnects with an old flame and has to make this decision. So I actually wrote this book in I guess 2017 to 2018. And it was such a fun departure from memoir. And I was very fortunate. I got an agent fairly quickly. Not, and that felt like a dream come true. And she was very enthusiastic. And we started sending it out. And so let's say it was like the November before. By the following September, it was going out on submission. And I was so excited and she was so optimistic. And we just got one lovely rejection after another. Like, "Oh, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this read, but it doesn't really feel big enough. It doesn't feel fresh enough to stand out." Or, "We have something similar coming out soon, but best of luck." Or, "I'm sure you've placed this by now. I'm sure another editor will feel differently." All of those. And we just kept trying and coming up empty. And then, so that was hard to hear. But so fast forward, she and we parted ways amicably. And I still had this love for this character of Claire because I guess also not that thankfully, it's not autobiographical. I did not reconnect with a former love, which when we get to the thriller part, I'll have to share the reaction. Like, I think in my thrillers, people are murdered or other terrible things happen. Nobody thinks it's me. But when it comes to like a middle-aged woman who's kind of lusting after an old boyfriend, people are like, "I know this is you." Just want to set the record straight and say, like, while certain other things that happen in the book, like for example the dog, where I can't catch this neighbor who's not picking up after their dog, that is autobiographical, but thankfully the potential affair part is not. But so then I decided I would work on it, periodically. And then I decided to submit on my own to a digital first publisher where you don't need an agent. And I got just a lovely email from an editor who wanted a revise and resubmit. She was saying that she felt that at that point, the character was not separated from her husband. They were still together. And she was saying a lot of readers are not going to like that. They're going to immediately have an issue that this character would consider an affair. Would you go back and rewrite it and separate them? And just she had a few other ideas that I thought were great. So I took it back. I spent months reworking it, and she was excited about the revision. And then when she brought it to the acquisitions table, they said it's too like mom based. Mom fiction isn't selling that well. Maybe, I don't know if it was the character's age, but they just said, "No, thank you." So at that point, I still, I went on, and that's when I thought to myself, okay, you know what? Maybe thrillers are a more straightforward path. Let me try my hand at that. So and I'm a big, I mean, I read across the board, but thrillers are a genre I gravitate toward. So I started writing the thrillers, but Claire was just, kind of always lingering there in the back of my head. And so I hired a developmental editor, and she had helped me with The Perfect Neighborhood, which was the thriller I wrote in between. And she was great, but she came back and she was like, I don't really know what to tell you here. Like, I don't see anything glaringly wrong with it. Like, maybe tighten this or change that or set apart a flashback, but I can't help you. So then I tried submitting again, and I got another request for a revise and resubmit. And their issue, that publisher's issue, was we don't know how to market this. Is it women's fiction, or is it rom-com? Is it chick lit? You need to kind of pick a lane. We don't know how to market it. And so at that point, I thought, I don't know. And that's again kind of reinforced my idea that thriller or suspense is a more straightforward idea. So I took it back again, and I kept going, and then I hired another developmental editor. Which when I write about this, the whole Claire thing, I say, like, is this a study in, perseverance or just madness that I couldn't let this go? But it's kind of, I always joke, like, with leftovers in the fridge. I'm like, somebody's going to eat that, like, around Thanksgiving. I'm like, we're making turkey soup, we're making turkey curry, we're making turkey quesadillas. Like, I can't let it go. So Claire was kind of the same way. So I hired another developmental editor, and she really honed in on, is this women's fiction or is this rom-com? Do you want to throw in an issue that would take it one way, or do you want to go more like slapstick comedy? And so she helped me find the path forward there. But so people will say, like, friends will be like, wow, you wrote that so fast. I'm like, no, actually, I've been working on it for 7 years. So that, I'm sorry, I know that's a long-winded answer, but Claire actually came before the thrillers, and I think it was really the challenge in placing that book that made me think, you know what, if you're going to write and you're going to spend a year of your life drafting, revising, or more, even more, when just a year is what it takes me to get down that first messy draft. I thought you're going to want to be able to place this somewhere. So
right. So biggest lesson learned then after this 7-year journey to get poor Claire Casey finally on the bookshelves? what was the biggest takeaway from that?
I think the biggest takeaway is, I guess, just how you can have a story that you love and that an agent might love. But I guess it's, people will say, like, separating the business from the book. I think, like, the ability to market something, and I teach some classes about how to write a query letter, and I always talk about, like, why comp titles are important. And really, it's to show someone where this book is going to sit on a library shelf, in a bookstore, who's your ideal reader. And so I think, like, I just thought I was having this great time writing this fun story that spoke to me. And it seemed like it spoke to some readers, but then when it came down to where can I place this and how am I going to market it? So I guess it's something that when I start to write a new work now, I really think about that. Like, what are the comp titles for this? And many times I'll even try to write the query letter first, or like the flap copy. And I think about, like, where would this sit, so that I don't find myself straddling those lines,
Right. With this book that's a mashup of 6 different genres. And I mean, it could be the most brilliant story in the world, but you're right. If someone thinks they can't actually sell that, then no one reads it. That's a shame.
Right. Yeah. I guess I didn't anticipate that problem. Like, I knew when I was writing my memoir, I got, of course, a ton of rejections there too, where people were saying, well, you're not famous, your platform isn't big enough. Or at the time, because it follows unemployment, and this was pre-pandemic, people were like, what's unemployment? Everybody could have a job if they want a job. Go drive Uber. And now, like, soon robots are going to be driving Uber. So there goes that theory. But I guess I thought that I understood memoir was its own beast in terms of placing, but I didn't anticipate that with women's fiction. And I know nobody likes the term chick lit, but I loved Bridget Jones, or I don't know how she does it. Where'd you go, Bernadette? And I was thinking it could slide into that one of those slots, and I hope it does now.
Well, let's talk about Claire because obviously she has been with you for a very long
It
time
has,
now. Not
yes.
just like a character you wrote way back when and you still think about her maybe every once in a while, but a character that was front and center for
Hmm.
years when you were
Yes.
working on this book. Did she change? And I'd like to know a little bit more about her. Like, what
Sure.
she was like and maybe inspiration. It was not she clearly she is not you, as we have already stated, but
Right.
like where did she come from and did she change? I mean, she was with you for a long time. Did she end up growing over the course of several drafts?
She definitely did. I think that really, and I have to say, I think that she really evolved the most in the final iteration. And I have to credit my editor, Lori Johnson at Severn, and her assistant, Mary. They were, I guess, and it's funny because they had not acquired it. It had actually been acquired by the editor who made the offer on the house on Cold Creek Lane. And when she offered on Claire, I was so excited to work with her again because I thought she had wonderful edits. But then she announced she was moving on to a different publisher. And, she said, you're going to be in great hands. And we did another edit before she left. And I thought Claire was good to go. And then I guess just Lori and Mary saw Claire through different eyes. And they were kind of like, we want more for this character in the end. And and there were times because Claire really is up against it a lot. Like they were kind of reading her as more snarky than perhaps I intended. And so in some ways, I softened her a bit. I gave her a new friend that she had not had in earlier iterations. And then I feel like I gave her more in terms of her career. So when she starts off, when she's in college and the flashbacks, you see her and she's kind of always talking about how she's going to write a novel. And in college, she dabbles in some poetry. And she starts off in, her early career days working for a newspaper. She hopes to have a column and she never kind of gets there. Things kind of sideline her and her dreams are not achieved other than that one children's book that she puts out. And then she can't seem to replicate the success of that. So they were kind of saying, wouldn't it be nice for Claire? She's got all of these things coming at her. Like, let's give her some good things. And I was really happy. But I think sometimes when you're too close to it and you've been with that character for so long, you can't necessarily see anymore what she's missing or you've been entrenched in these early drafts. You can't figure out a way to make her bigger. And so I'm so grateful to them for their vision and for seeing Claire with these fresh eyes.
Right, right. So is Claire someone either the way she started out or the way she ended up, is she someone you would have been friends with? Is she someone that you kind of see reflected in people and the situations that they're in?
I definitely think so. I mean, I think a lot of times, just as an example, when I think maybe if you go to like a school pickup, everybody there is kind of, smiling and friendly and like, of course I'll make those 3,000 cupcakes. But then if it's a close friend, you get to the car and they're like, geez, I don't have time to bake these cupcakes. And like, this is the last thing I want to do. Do any of these kids need more cupcakes? Or, so I think she's like the friend who has just had it and isn't afraid to be at this point, like honest and like this is just getting to be way too much. She's asked at one point, like, can you do these cupcakes? Can you do this or that? And she also, because Alex, her former boyfriend, is very successful. He's constantly posting these motivational, quips or mantras on LinkedIn, and she really locks into them and starts using them in her life. Like no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require an explanation. Like, so she has all of these kind of running through her head. And so she does change over the course of time, kind of taking those in and then spitting them back out as people make these crazy demands of her.
Keeping in mind that the plot, the storyline takes place only over the span of one day. I mean, you have flashbacks to fill in, but was that difficult to hone in basically the storyline to just that very short time period?
I think that like putting it over the course of one day was something that I wanted from the outset. So I was kind of determined. At different points, people had said, it might make it easier if you told the story linearly, like from the time she and her husband, and it does open, you get to see the scene where she tells her husband, like, you need to go. And then we get to see the scene of when she's at the reunion. And so you're getting those, as you say, through flashbacks. But there were different points where, and it's funny because instead of chapter headings or titles or numbers, I have timestamps throughout the day. And so sometimes I would think about, okay, I think about my own town. If I'm driving to CVS, how long is that going to take me? Or if I have a phone call with an old friend or I have to send a work email. So a lot of times I'd be like, okay, that happened in 18 minutes. Is that accurate? Or, as the clock is ticking down to her deadline to meet Alex, like I tried to be very aware of, is that a realistic, or like, okay, I got to get Claire moving, or it's lunch, okay, she's been away from, and that was funny too. I guess my editors were kind of like, Claire's away from her desk for like 90 minutes. Is that acceptable? It was just, it's funny. I'm like, well, we can make Claire do whatever we want, but like you have to kind of address those times. So that was a bit of a challenge. But I felt like because I was so married to that concept, I was willing to meet the demands of it throughout the day.
So after your experience with this genre, women's fiction, chick lit, rom-com, whatever you want to call it, for whatever shelf you want to place it on, do you think you would do more stories like this? Do you think you would try again for this genre?
I think I would because I love it and I enjoy reading it and it was fun to create. And I've had another idea that would fall into that category, that I guess a comp title, because again, I'm married to, like, you must have a comp title or don't even try. I don't know if you read Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting, where sort of it's like an ensemble cast and how they all sort of interconnect. And but I guess I do kind of fear it because it is a commitment and it's a labor of love. And then it's like somebody saying, like, your baby isn't good enough, or you're like, I don't know what to do with your baby. So I mean, and also too, I think now the world is kind of changing. I would not be afraid to self-publish it. I definitely would. I felt like I benefited so much from every editor along the way who offered me. I mean, I don't know that I'd want to repeat the same path where I end up with an agent and all these editors weighing in, hiring two editors, having one editor acquire it, and then get the feedback from two new. It was almost like, I feel like instead of too many cooks spoiling the broth, I feel like all of these cooks elevated my recipe, and I'm so grateful to them. But each time new edits would come in, I'd be like kind of like holding my head. I want to tackle, like, and also, is it time to just let Claire go? I don't know. That was always in the back of my head. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're glad you didn't. So we'll
thank
look
you.
forward to Claire coming out. But I want to mention, you mentioned The House on Cold Creek Lane. So since we have chatted, you also released that book, which again was a thriller in line with The Perfect Neighborhood. Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about The House on Cold Creek Lane?
Sure. So that's told from two different points of view. The first character you meet is Laurel West, and she's a young mom. She's on bed rest. She and her husband and their toddler live in a cramped apartment in Manhattan. And she and her husband have been house hunting for months and they keep getting outbid, which I live in New Jersey. And unfortunately, it seems like everyone I speak to is having that experience and was having the experience of getting outbid for homes when I was writing it. So and this is a little bit of where the idea came from. They end up, her husband, while she's on bed rest, finds this house and he makes a lowball offer and it gets accepted. And kind of right away, Laurel, who has had some definite, tragedies in her past, it is kind of, her spidey senses are tingling. Like, is this too good to be true? Why, how, after all this disappointment, did we get this house? And then, so they move in. And initially she's like, okay, this is charming. And then she begins to meet her neighbors and she starts to think like something's not quite right here. And her husband, meanwhile, has had this idyllic childhood and wants to replicate that for their family. So he is kind of like, get it together, Laurel. Like, this is our new start. This is your new home. Make some friends, get our son in activities. And then meanwhile, you meet this other character, Corey Sutton, who is in Florida, and she has moved into her mom's retirement home. She also is trying to overcome a tragedy in her past. And as her story unfolds, you begin to learn how these two women are connected and how both of them, when you start the novel, they're not coming from places of strength. They've both been, weakened by the events they've experienced. But as the novel continues, they get stronger and they kind of find their footing, and it kind of comes to what I like to say is an explosive conclusion. So that was fun to write.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it seems with most of your stories, thrillers, and also with Claire Casey, your stories tend to reside sort of in this kind of domestic setting,
Yeah.
right? And so instead of which is interesting to write a thriller or a suspense novel in a very kind of micro setting like that. We're not talking about world espionage and traveling
Right.
the globe, and you have the whole world is your stage.
Playground, right?
This is, your house, your neighborhood, something very contained. What is it that draws you to this sort of micro setting? I don't know how else to describe it, but
No, that's a great question. Well, I've grown up always in similar suburbs to the ones I'm writing about, and I've been in New Jersey. And it's funny, as the books have come out, so I grew up in one town that's very similar to the town of Oak Hill, where The Perfect Neighborhood is set. But I currently live in a town that's very similar to that. And then I've worked in Princeton, I've worked in Westfield. So I've accumulated friends along the way. And when they've kindly read the book, they're like, "Oh, you set this here, you set this here." So I think it feels very familiar. But I also think there's almost like a sense of claustrophobia that, for example, in The Perfect Neighborhood, when Rachel's son goes missing on his walk home from kindergarten, like that just spreads like wildfire. And every time she's out, she can almost hear the whispers of like, "There's the mom." And then also when Laurel West moves into her town in the house on Cold Creek Lane, it's like she can see these cliques that have already formed. And she's trying to figure out, at one point, she says, she talks about the trouble of trying to find her tribe. Like who will she be friendly with? And, she's new and she's got this baby and she's got this toddler, and just the struggles of everything that you think of a small town America or like Main Street as just like charming and a safe space. But I think if you're looking at it through the right lens, you kind of scratch the surface and you're like, "Ooh, this isn't as easy or as idyllic as we want to think it is."
right, right. Well, another book that you have written since we last spoke, another suspense thriller. You Shouldn't Have Done That. Great title, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Sure. This was another one that was fun to write, and it follows these two families, the Whitakers and the Chapmans, and they also, this one it's a little bit of a departure from my small town. So the families, they meet when their sons, Cal Whitaker and Brad Chapman, are in preschool together, and the moms become friends. And then, as often happens in the suburbs, they introduce the husbands and the other siblings, and before you know it, they're going on vacations together, celebrating birthdays together. And as the sons grow up, they sort of take different trajectories. And you're going to meet them when they're in their 20s and they're out in Wyoming. So there's my departure from small town New Jersey. And Brad has gone out. Brad has dropped out of college. He's out there working as a ski instructor. Cal graduates from college. He's this golden boy, handsome, charming. And he was supposed to work for his dad's company. And after a couple of months decides, "You know what? This isn't for me. I'm going out to Wyoming to hang with Brad." And of course, that is a thorn in his parents' side. And so fast forward a few months, the boys go skiing together and only Brad comes home. And sort of compounding matters is that there's a snowstorm coming through and Brad does not report Cal missing right away. And it sort of becomes a case of, well, is Brad a suspect? Did Brad know more? Or, Brad himself might tell you, hey, look, he's my roommate and my friend, but I'm not his nanny or, his bodyguard. I don't have to keep track. And so as time passes and Cal is not found immediately, tensions escalate between the families that had been so close. And so you're kind of toggling between New Jersey and Wyoming. And then also Cal has a sister. I felt like this was kind of topical. She's a high school student, and she sort of sees an opportunity she wanted to be an influencer, and she's gotten like some small time, maybe sponsorships, but she wants to be an influencer. And so she herself doesn't really think Cal is missing. She thinks, maybe he met someone, saw a better opportunity, ditched Brad. So she kind of takes to her own social media to blow up this story of like, where's my brother? And that kind of takes on a life of its own.
And so what was the spark for this one? Because you're right, it is a bit of a departure. So where did the idea come from?
I guess I had seen a news story about something similar where a friend kind of walked the line in another friend's disappearance of was he a suspect, or was he just and had there been a fracture in the friendship that led him, like, was this guy just living his own life? Was there trouble behind the scenes no one knew about, to the point that he just didn't care where his friend is, or had he actually done something to the friend? So that kind of made me just kind of imagine that scenario, and especially thinking about the damage it would do to the families if they had been friendly.
So you've now written a number of these thrillers,
Mhm.
the rom-com chick lit, memoir. So you've dabbled in a number of different genres. Is that still the plan, to keep just trying new things as story ideas strike you? Or is there one that's really, I would say, your voice, and you might try something else, but really there's a lane that you are happy to stay in?
Oh, thank you. Well, I think that's such an important question for me to be thinking about. And I wish I had a solid answer, because when I met with my editor, and I think where I saw you at BoucherCon in Nashville, I met with my editor, and we had been talking about Cold Creek had just come out, and she was in the early stages of giving me notes on Claire Casey. And she had said to me, you have to really think about this. Like, your thriller readers may not follow you. And I was going to say, I don't know that I have thousands of thriller readers. I hope to eventually, but I was going to say that would be wonderful if that were a problem, where I had amassed, millions of fans who were maybe not going to come with me. But so that's something that I'm very curious to see how that translates. I think so far on social media, I've been very fortunate that some people, who have signed up for blog tours are like, oh, I read her other books, I'll read this too. And they don't seem to be holding it against me that I've switched. And I guess I try to go with the project that excites me the most, because again, I know I'm going to be at it, day to day. It's going to take
Right.
time away from my family. It's going to take time away from, I mean, I joke that like I'll do anything to get out of cleaning the house, but there are times where I'm like, I should be exercising. I should be outside enjoying this beautiful day, but I'm inside trying to wrestle a chapter into submission. So I think I have to really love it. But I'm finishing, or I'm trying to finish a draft of something that would fall into the suspense category now. But I do think so. Like, I was joking with my husband and my kids the other day, like, I feel like I'm running out of ways to murder someone, like fictional murder. I was thinking about authors like Lisa Jewell or Miranda Reichs, like people who've written 24 thrillers. And I'm kind of at like number four, like, okay, I give up. I don't know how to, I don't know how to murder someone. Like, I've run out. I may have to watch more Datelines, but
Well, that might
so
be a problem for the writer in you, but I'm sure the people around you are like, we're happy. We're happy that you as a person have trouble finding different ways to murder people.
exactly right.
So, okay. So, another thriller in the works, and an idea. So that's kind of what's on your plate. Like, again, whatever story idea comes along that
Right.
really interests you.
Yes, exactly. Like, I guess after, hopefully I'll wrap this up in the next few weeks and then try to figure out my path for that book. But I've had a few ideas that I would classify as like women's fiction or lighter. And I think like it would be nice to do that, especially for with the summer coming up. I'll take a notebook to the pool. My youngest son is like a diving board addict. Like he would just jump off the diving boards and swim all day. So I feel like it's a great place to be disconnected from the internet, and I can just kind of sit in the shade and draft in a notebook. And I think something light as opposed to murder. Like, I guess, I don't know if I had mentioned it when we spoke last time, but I printed out pages of The Perfect Neighborhood to the pool with me, and I was trying to edit there, and a wind would blow and my pages would be flying all over. And I thought, oh God, if people are like randomly find a page, they're gonna be like, that lady is dark and disturbed, and what is she doing over there? So maybe it's good if I stick in the light for the summer.
Right. That might be safer.
Yes.
Good. Well, Liz, if people want to learn more about you and the books, look for new releases, that sort of thing, where can they go to find you and that information?
Oh, thank you. My website is lizalterman.com, and I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram. I'm also Liz Alterman. On Substack, I have a newsletter that kind of lists like where I'll be, what I'm working on. I try to give a little behind the scenes story to whichever project I'm working on. I also try to give shout outs to friends' books, things I've enjoyed, or even like a TV series that I've enjoyed. Sometimes I'll do giveaways. So if anyone, it's a free newsletter. I don't block anything behind a paywall. I'm always grateful if anyone wants to support it. I appreciate that, but I don't expect it. And then lastly, I would just say if anyone chooses any of my books for book clubs, I'm always happy to Zoom in, or if they're in the area, I'll pop by. Although I joke, like one time I pulled into a driveway, I had donated books to a friend's daughter's school's like basket auction. And all of a sudden I'm like, am I setting myself up for my own thriller? Like, who are these people? And they turned out to be beyond lovely. So I, knock wood, I'll only have that experience, but.
Good. Well, if people do want to purchase a copy of Claire Casey's Had Enough or any of your other books, best place to buy them?
I would say your favorite indie bookstore. I'm very fortunate that I live near a wonderful bookstore that has, and a few of them that have been really supportive of me. So I try to direct readers there first, or bookshop.org. I've also been really fortunate to have some wonderful audiobook narrators. I'm really excited about the voice actor who's going to do Claire Casey. I've listened to a few of her other things, and like I can't even wait to get the sample because I think she's really going to knock it out of the park. And for my past books, I've been very lucky that as I attend book clubs, I feel like it's half and half. People read, people listen, and they've always been really kind. And I know how difficult that work is to do. So
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to them.
Good, good. Well, Liz, I want to congratulate you
Oh,
on
thank you.
Claire Casey's Had Enough. We'll look forward to that coming out soon, and all the other books. And we'll look forward to your works in progress when they're ready. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of
Oh,
luck with the rest of your writing journey.
thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published, as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author, or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.